28th of February 2026. A girls' elementary school in Minab in South Iran, hit by a US missile strike. A 170 killed, most of them children. After decades of threats, proxy wars, and brinkmanship, the United States launches direct military strikes on Iran.
The Department of War launched Operation Epic Fury, the most lethal, most complex, and most precise aerial operation in history.
The US's war with Iran is underway. In conjunction with their ally Israel, who claim Iran is the greatest threat to their country and to the entire Middle East. Iran vows to retaliate.
رئیس جمهور آمریکا ثابت کرده تنها زبانی که میشناسد زبان زور است.
Iranian missiles and drones slam into Israeli cities and military sites. US targets across the Gulf come under attack as Iran retaliates against America's regional allies. As violence escalates, a new fear emerges: control of the Strait of Hormuz, the artery through which much of the world's oil flows, shut by Iran. Oil prices soar, global economies shrink. But this is a conflict fought in the shadows for nearly half a century. One transforming the Middle East and beyond, long before the first missile is ever fired. In 1951, a nationalist leader rises to power in Iran, Mohammad Mosaddegh. Democratically elected, his campaign pledges to take back control of Iran's oil, a promise immensely popular amongst Iranians following years of social inequality and foreign domination. Once in power, he nationalizes the oil industry, stripping the British-owned Anglo-Iranian oil company of complete control over Iran's most valuable natural resource. Britain's reliance on this oil prompts them to ask the US for help to overthrow Mossadegh.
The Brits had tried to convince the United States to get rid of Mossadegh earlier on because of the sin he had committed, which was that he wanted Iran to keep 50% of its own oil revenue and income instead of shipping all of it out to the Brits. And the United States was not sympathetic to the British position.
The Brits find another way of convincing the US to join their efforts to oust Mossadegh.
Once Mossadegh was cast not as a nationalist that was challenging British control over Iranian resources, but as a potential communist that would turn Iran in the direction of the Soviet Union. This was the argument that ultimately worked with the American side at the time, because everything was seen from the lens of the Cold War.
What follows becomes one of the most consequential covert operations in modern Middle Eastern history. In August 1953, a CIA and MI6-led coup unfolds in the streets of Tehran. After just 2 years as Iran's leader, Mohammad Mosaddegh is overthrown.
They got rid of him, got rid of the entire prime minister position, essentially, or at least one in which there was an independent parliament that could elect him.
In his place, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. On the 22nd of August 1953, he returns to Tehran after his family's exile during World War II. He was the son of Iran's former king, Reza Shah, who abdicated in 1941, handing over power to his son. The US and Britain believe the new Shah is a person they can control, and that his royal lineage will make him an acceptable choice for Iranians.
The Shah of Iran was a military officer, a very important military officer, and he became the leader of the coup. And the Shah of Iran becomes essentially an American puppet, guaranteeing access to for Western companies to Iran's oil.
For many Iranians, this is more than a coup. It's a moment when foreign intervention once again reshapes the country's political trajectory. And with that, instead of getting stronger, Iran's relationship with the United States begins to unravel.
The Iranian people came to see the fall of Mosaddegh as the doing of the United States and Britain. The Shah's government from 1953 to 1979 was not an independent government. It was an American-imposed government and was controlled by the United States.
The Shah consolidates his power and for 2 decades tightly controls Iran.
The Shah ruled with an iron fist. He had a secret security service called the Savak, which was fairly brutal, as security services are, in order to keep his rule. And also the Shah took quite a bit of the proceeds of the oil, basically skimming off the top, billions and billions of dollars into his own family's bank accounts.
Under Pahlavi's rule, Iran undergoes rapid transformation. In 1963, the Shah institutes wide-ranging reforms, modernizing the country. The so-called White Revolution changes the laws on land ownership and gave women the right to vote. But one particular decision enrages his critics.
The more the Shah was seen as the American Shah, as someone who had been imposed on Iran by the American side, the more he lost even the nationalist card. And we could see that particularly after his decision in 1963 to sign the Status of Forces Agreement with the United States that gave American personnel in Iran the status of being above Iranian law. This was heavily attacked.
Criticism of the Shah grows, but to openly express it is not tolerated. Beneath the surface, however, opposition is quietly mobilizing, and at the center of it, one man, Ruhollah Khomeini.
Ayatollah Khomeini at the time, who started to emerge as one of the most outspoken critics of the Shah, with the argument that the Shah is selling out Iran, its resources, to the West. The Brits, as we already discussed, had taken a lot of Iranian resources. There had been heavily involvement by the Russians as well in Iranian affairs. Iran was in a uniquely weak position when you take a look at its 3,000 plus year history. And there was a very strong sense that Iran needed to be strong, and it needed to first and foremost make itself independent of other foreign powers.
Born around 1902, Khomeini emerges not from Iran's palaces, but from the religious seminaries of Qom, the heart of Shia scholarship. As a senior cleric, he becomes one of the Shah's fiercest critics. His sermons condemn the monarchy, earning him a growing following and the attention of the regime.
And it was for his persistent criticism of the Shah that he was exiled 15
The Shah forces Khomeini into exile, first to Iraq, then France, a surprising refuge for an Islamic revolutionary. But distance only amplifies his voice. From abroad, he unites an unlikely coalition of religious conservatives and secular activists. The revolution was coming, and Khomeini was waiting. Protests erupt on the streets of Tehran. The unrest escalates into a nationwide uprising that would see Iran's monarchy begin to unravel. Months of chaos ensue. And on January 16, 1979, the Shah leaves Iran, claiming he needs medical treatment, never to return, bringing an abrupt end to his 37-year rule.
The Shah leaves to the United States and takes with him $10 billion in bank accounts that are secured by the United States. Well, when the Shah leaves the country and takes with him $10 billion, the new government thinks it's not the Shah's money, that's Iran's money, and it should have that $10 billion back. Well, the United States basically, this is the Carter administration, doesn't do much about these complaints.
As the Pahlavi dynasty collapses, Khomeini returns from exile to a hero's welcome. Millions of Iranians line the streets from the airport to Behesht Zahra cemetery, where many of the Shah's opponents were buried. Here, he addresses the nation for the first time. For centuries, religion in Iran lived in the background of power. Khomeini brings it to the forefront, turning faith into a tool of governance.
This was not the classical interpretation of Shia Islam. It was a very revolutionary interpretation of Shia Islam. It was about bringing about social change, empowering the poor, liberating Iran from America. In other words, the kind of religion that he was promoting and the religious classes that he claimed should be ruling Iran in the name of the revolution would bring about the political desires that the Iranians had at that time, including democracy.
Despite the adoration, the new leader of Iran initially exercises caution.
Khomeini did not want to unnecessarily antagonize the United States at first, particularly after the revolution had been successful. It was important not to incentivize the United States to seek an overthrow of the Islamic Republic.
But Washington still feels threatened by Iran's new direction.
The United States began to reach out to the moderate segment of the revolution, sort of the more democratic Islamic part of it, which was then in the form of the Prime Minister Mehdi Bazargan.
As a consequence, the distrust of the US grows among many Iranians, and one decision in particular ignites fury.
The Shah fell ill with cancer, and through the intermediary of his friends, President Carter allowed him to come to New York for cancer treatment. And in Tehran, the view was that Americans were preparing for a repeat of the 1953 coup.
For many in Tehran, this was proof the US still supports the regime that had been toppled. Suspicion turns to anger, and the events that follow capture the world's attention. On the 4th of November 1979, Iranian students seized the US embassy in Tehran, taking diplomats and embassy staff hostage as the world watches on.
Now, you may not agree, as many do not, with the taking over of the American embassy. But the fact of the matter is, the background of the 1953 coup was very much alive in the minds of many Iranians. And unfortunately, the way the United States has behaved since then has vindicated the assumption that the United States never wanted to recognize the will of the Iranian people, always wanted to replace this government with somebody subservient to the interests of the United States.
Publicly, Khomeini gives his blessing to the embassy attack, a decision that provokes uproar in his own government. In protest, just 2 days after the takeover, Iran's Prime Minister, Mehdi Bazargan, and his entire cabinet resign. The United States attempts to rescue the hostages in Operation Eagle Claw in April 1980. The mission ends in disaster, and the humiliation of the failure leaves Washington desperate to find an end to the crisis.
The responsibility is fully my own. In the aftermath of the attempt, we continue to hold the government of Iran responsible for the safety and for the early release of the American hostages who have been held so long.
The hostage crisis goes on for 444 days. Their release is ultimately secured through diplomacy rather than military action.
Khomeini reacted to the reality that he was facing, which is how big it became internationally, and showing that America was now unable to do anything about such an act that Iran had carried out, and also using the diversion of the hostage crisis to basically purge the secular leftist element of the revolution altogether.
One by one, opposition voices are silenced. Internationally, Khomeini is vilified by most governments for his defense of the hostage takers. His image in the West, now of a hardline, hostile leader, to be feared. Across the border, America's then ally Iraq is watching, fearful. Their concern, the revolution will reach them and spark an uprising among their substantial Shia population, a fear the US reinforces. In September 1980, encouraged by US military and financial support, Saddam Hussein invades Iran. The 8-year Iran-Iraq war begins.
Islamic Republic was firmly of the belief that America was behind that war, that America encouraged Saddam and then later on encouraged other Arab countries to support Saddam with intelligence, with money, and that the 8-year war was also really an American war against the revolution.
The US and Iran are now implacable enemies. Khomeini casts the war with Iraq as a divine struggle, dismissing multiple ceasefire requests from Baghdad. Iraq's actions during the war cross serious legal and moral boundaries. Despite this, the United States continues to throw its support behind them.
Saddam Hussein used sarin nerve gas against the Iranian fighters in the Iran-Iraq war. Many thousands were killed by sarin nerve gas. This was all, many journalists documented this in detail. And the American government, this would be the Reagan administration at this point, you can find the fingerprints of, it's called the receipts, the precursor chemicals to the sarin nerve gas being traced back to American companies. So at this time, America did not complain about Saddam Hussein's use of sarin nerve gas on the battlefield. And this was one of the big issues that Iran certainly noticed.
The cost of the war is devastating. $600 billion of damage to Iranian infrastructure. More than 1 million lives lost. In the end, there is no victory, but a survival that serves only to embolden Iran further.
Given how calamitous that war was in terms of damage to Iran's economy, the number of Iranians that were killed, the sacrifices that the war took, it basically shaped the Islamic Republic and the Iranian society for a whole generation to come. For instance, Iran's Revolutionary Guards was born out of the Iran-Iraq war. Most of its commanders, until very recently, were the veterans of that war. The lessons they learned about America, about politics, about war making, about national security, were all born out of that war.
Shortly after the end of the war, in June 1989, following months of ill health, Khomeini dies. His replacement is Ali Khamenei. Though never the most senior cleric, he was a loyal disciple of his predecessor, and his revolutionary and political credentials see him appointed to the highest office in Iran. He would go on to be Iran's supreme leader for 36 years. But Washington continues to see Tehran as a threat to American interests, despite the new leadership. And Israel, a longtime ally of the US, stresses that Iran is an ever-growing threat and a dangerous influence across the region. This ushers in a new era of proxy wars, harsher sanctions, and covert operations. The most powerful of these proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Israel began to become more worried about an Iranian juggernaut emerging out of the Iran-Iraq war rather than an Iraqi juggernaut emerging. And then also in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon, which then Iran viewed essentially as Israel positioning itself to become a much bigger force in the Middle East, and that and to basically position itself to take Iran on as well. And that's the beginning of Iran's much more direct involvement in Lebanon, creation of Hezbollah, etc. From this point onwards, Iran and Israel view one another antagonistically.
What Tehran sees as deterrence, Israel views as an existential threat on its doorstep.
The Israelis, after first having tried to be Iran's ally, even throughout the 1980s, completely shift in the early 1990s and now become the foremost power, pushing the United States to contain Iran, sanction Iran, and eventually go to war with Iran, because now they view Iran as a regional rival rather than a potential regional partner.
Washington echoes these fears, but military intervention still remains off the table. Instead, they respond with more crippling sanctions. The US and its Western allies cut Iran off from the global economy, targeting everything from its banks and oil exports to international trade. The goal is clear: isolate Iran economically and curb its ability to project power beyond its borders. Iran has no choice but self-sufficiency.
Iran has applied the same lessons it learned from the Iran-Iraq war to surviving economic isolation. In other words, they have to do it themselves. They have to produce their own things. They have to figure ways to go around sanctions. They have to sustain their economy, even though it gets poorer. They have to do it on their own.
But self-sufficiency has its limits for a country now isolated from global markets. So Iran invests in its nuclear program, a program they say is for domestic and peaceful use. But what is acceptable in the hands of a Western-backed monarch is far less acceptable in the hands of a revolutionary government opposed to the US.
Well, what happened in 1979 was the American government just did a 180 and completely reversed gears on supporting the development of nuclear power plants in Iran for electric power purposes. But the Iranian government didn't see why it should stop.
What follows is a new phase in US-Iran relations, one where the nuclear question dominates diplomacy, confrontation, and global attention. For more than 4 decades, the United States and its allies tried to curb Iran's influence through sanctions, international pressure, and isolation. But the Islamic Republic refuses to abandon what it views as essential for its survival and further develops its nuclear program. At the turn of the millennium, a hidden nuclear site is discovered in Iran, triggering alarm in Washington.
In 2002 is when the world discovers that Iran is building a centrifuge facility at Natanz. The Iranian government admitted to it. The American government at the time, this was with the second George Bush administration in 2002, claimed that it was a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But from that point on, things went on a different track. It became not just a political antagonism between the United States and Iran, it became a military antagonism.
Since then, Washington's stance has been consistent.
Just to make it abundantly clear to the Iranian regime that they must not have the capability of developing a nuclear weapon.
The United States will do everything in our power to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
Iran will never get a nuclear weapon on my watch.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
For Iran's critics, the concerns are obvious.
I think everybody understands that nuclear proliferation is a threat to not simply the nearby countries, but regions, in fact, the entire world, because it is certainly the case that if there are regimes or governments overturned, those nuclear materials and those nuclear weapons could fall into the wrong hands.
Any efforts at diplomacy falter and sanctions tighten. Iran presses ahead with its nuclear program, insisting it's peaceful. Israel pressures the US to adopt a harder line, insisting they're vulnerable to Iranian aggression. But for Washington, military action remains off the table.
The Israelis now want to make sure that Iran and no other country in the region can challenge Israel's dominance and position in the region. The nuclear program has been the most effective pretext for that. That's not to say that the nuclear program is not a challenge from the Israeli standpoint, but it's not a challenge that necessitates war.
Unable to convince the US into military action, Israel pursues its own covert war on Iran. In 2010, a suspected Israeli cyber attack, Stuxnet, strikes the Natanz nuclear facility, sabotaging centrifuges. The damage is significant, but not beyond recovery. Tel Aviv continues its campaign against Iran. Israel's intelligence agency Mossad assassinates Iranian nuclear scientists, the most prominent, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Still undeterred, Iran keeps developing its nuclear objectives, and Israel continues to sound the alarm. No one more aggressively than Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Where should a red line be drawn? A red line should be drawn right here. Before Iran completes the second stage of nuclear enrichment necessary to make a bomb.
Netanyahu has been pursuing the same policy for the past 34 years. The first time that Netanyahu said Iran was a month or a couple of years away from a nuclear weapon was in 1992, when he was only a member of Knesset. And he's been repeating that ever since.
Despite Israeli pressure, Washington is determined to avoid military action and instead choose mediation. In 2015, US President Barack Obama achieves through diplomacy what years of sanctions could not. After nearly 2 years of highly sensitive, secret negotiations, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, is reached and signed by a group of world leaders.
JCPOA started from two opposing objectives. Iran was saying that we have a right to peaceful nuclear technology, including enrichment, and the United States was saying that Iran cannot have enrichment. So these two objectives were irreconcilable. The minute, and that was the most difficult part, the minute that we could come to the same objective, and that was Iran has a right to nuclear power, to nuclear energy and technology, but Iran should not develop nuclear weapons. This common objective enabled us to reach somewhere.
Critics of the agreement believe the United States has made a dangerous compromise.
There was sand under the foundation of the JCPOA because of the notification responsibilities for the inspectors and the limitations on the inspectors. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. They couldn't inspect military facilities. As I understand, they had to give a month's notice. Any agreement to be solid has got to be subject to intrusive verification. And the JCPOA, which was not a treaty, not an agreement, but a joint plan of action, didn't have that.
The loudest of critics, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But years of frustration with previous administrations give way to a new opportunity in 2017, when he finds a more willing ally in the White House.
Netanyahu was trying to persuade Trump during the first Trump administration to bomb Iran. What happened, and do regime change in Iran, and what happened is Trump didn't do it.
But what follows is no less consequential. From the Oval Office, a series of decisions would push Washington and Tehran closer to the brink of direct conflict than at any time in decades.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
2 years later, with little left to restrain them, the US assassinate the commander of Iran's elite Quds force, Qasem Soleimani, in Iraq.
We took action last night to stop a war. Soleimani has been perpetrating acts of terror to destabilize the Middle East for the last 20 years. What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago.
The US insists Soleimani was developing plans to attack US diplomats and service members in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. But to many in Iran, Soleimani was a war hero. Iran's supreme leader warns of severe revenge, but ultimately exercises restraint.
When President Trump assassinated Soleimani in January 2020, which he did with airstrikes, air power, what Iran did was not do a tit for tat. It did not launch retaliation back. It did not escalate with the retaliation. It did essentially a half tit for a tat. It under-responded.
Despite this restraint, tensions escalate. But somehow the fragile status quo between the United States and Iran endures. Israel, however, intensifies its covert campaigns, while Iran continues to fund and arm its proxies in the region. But the defining moment is still to come, one that ignites the entire region.
October 7th changed Israel fundamentally. I mean, the ferocity and scale of Hamas's attack, the way in which the Israeli public was both shocked and angered and horrified by what happened, changed the psychology of Israel in terms of how far it would go, at what cost, to eliminate all threats that it saw around it.
Israel's response in Gaza, brutal and relentless. The official death toll, over 70,000. Hundreds of thousands more displaced. Entire areas destroyed. A year into that genocide, in 2024, Israel bombs Iran's diplomatic compound in Syria, killing senior Iranian commanders. Iran retaliates, launching its first ever direct military strike on Israel. Israel also expands its long-standing military incursions into southern Lebanon, and in September 2024, they assassinate Hassan Nasrallah, the longtime leader of Iranian-backed Hezbollah. They go on to take military control of parts of the south. Iran's proxies across the region also become more active, particularly the Houthis in Yemen.
Netanyahu believes that in order for Israel to be secure, Israel has to destroy all the states that are that have the power that over time could damage Israel in the future.
Fragile governments in the region are made even more vulnerable. After decades of mounting pressure, on December 8, 2024, Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria collapses, ending 54 years of the Assad family rule, weakening an important regional ally for Iran.
The Israel that came out of the October 7th attack was determined to destroy Hamas, end the Palestinian issue by displacing Palestinians out of Gaza and potentially the West Bank, once and for all, finish the Palestinian issue, finish Hezbollah, take over South Lebanon, take advantage of the collapse of Bashar Assad, and make sure that Syria would be weak and controlled by Israel territorially and otherwise, and then finish off Iran.
In the midst of all this, diplomatic efforts continue between the United States and Iran. In Oman, indirect negotiations regarding Iran's nuclear program begin. Amid these talks, in June 2025, Netanyahu opts for military action. He justifies the attacks as necessary for for Israel's very existence.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat.
Iran responds within hours, and waves of missiles target Israel. This sees the start of a fierce exchange of direct attacks that would go on for 12 days. All negotiations between the United States and Iran come to an end.
The way the 12-day war started last June was, we need to remember, the United States was negotiating directly with Iran, and they were talking about the beginnings of an actual deal. And what started the 12-day war was when Israel, again, on its own, went and bombed the negotiators. So they literally knew the time and place of the negotiators of Iran. And the 12-day war started by Israel using that targeting information, which was based on going to the negotiations, to kill the negotiators.
Nonetheless, the United States backs its ally Israel and enters the conflict. In June 2025, they launch Operation Midnight Hammer, bombing 3 major Iranian nuclear sites.
The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Despite the attack, Iran signals a willingness to pursue diplomacy rather than escalate further.
Iran will continue exercising its legitimate right of self-defense. Iran is ready to consider diplomacy once again.
But with diplomacy failing, Iran responds, not with another warning, but with missiles towards Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest US military hub in the Middle East. Despite the attack, a deal brokered by Doha and Washington brings an end to the 12-day war. In January 2026, growing unrest inside Iran lead to anti-government protests. These are framed by some as coordinated by external forces, and by others as spontaneous uprisings in response to poor economic conditions. Seeing a possible opportunity for regime change, Trump encourages Iranians who oppose the government to continue their uprising.
To all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible. Help is on its way.
But that help never arrives. Instead, the US begin moving military assets throughout the region. Israel, though not at the table, is also talking to the United States.
A narrative had been pushed by the Israelis that depicted Iran as so weak that just a small push would cause the government there to either collapse and implode or lead to their capitulation. They're already so weak. Look at all of the protests inside the country. They're about to fall. Why don't you just do a little bit and then you can take credit for the entire collapse of this regime? But it was a complete miscalculation.
For weeks, the US and Iran seem to be edging close to a deal in Geneva. Oman's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Chief Mediator, Bedr al-Busaidi, is optimistic a deal is within reach.
Are you hopeful today, sir? Are you hopeful?
But on February 28, 2026, on the eve of the agreement being signed, Israel and the United States launch a full-scale attack on Iran. Diplomacy is over, and Washington has a stark warning for Tehran.
Lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death.
I think President Trump made a good effort to try to start a new set of negotiations and didn't work. So I think he took the negotiations to the next level or to a different dimension and used military force as a matter of trying to compel the Iranians to a better solution.
But for many in Iran, they believe Israel finally convinces Washington to do what it couldn't do alone.
So it is now apparent that the United States had intentions or was persuaded by the Israelis to go into policies that from any analytical perspective does not even serve the interests of the United States. At the end of the day, the current war serves only the interests of Netanyahu, not the American people, not the United States government, and certainly not the people of our region.
On the first day of the war, Israel bombs the compound of Ali Khamenei, killing Iran's supreme leader along with several members of his family. But his assassination, along with those of other leading figures, fails to bring the collapse of the Islamic Republic.
Iran is an authoritarian regime, but it's not that kind of a dictatorship. The Islamic Republic was not built to be one-man rule. It does have a supreme leader that is constitutionally and religiously the top of the system. But the Islamic Republic was built for resilience and survival exactly because it has been isolated and at war with the world's premier superpower for 4 decades. It has been built in a way that it can survive the killing of a leader or the decapitation of a leader.
Khamenei's son, Mujtaba, is appointed as his successor. Under his new leadership, Iran's response is swift and, to many, surprising. Israel's own vulnerabilities are exposed as some Iranian drones and missiles break through its much-vaunted Iron Dome. And across the Gulf, long-standing assumptions about US protection are being questioned as Iran repeatedly attacks America's regional allies.
The idea that the United States can and will protect the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf is gone. They could be furious with Iran, and very justifiably so, for attacking them. But the fact remains that the GCC as an idea and the American bases and the close security partnership with the United States was built to protect the Persian Gulf Emirates against an aggressive Iran. And in that, the United States has failed.
Though militarily outmatched by the United States and Israel, both seem unprepared by the ferocity of Iran's response. Iran also holds a powerful bargaining chip, one of the world's most important waterways, through which millions of barrels of oil and liquefied gas are transported, the Strait of Hormuz. They control it, close it, and prevent any ship from passing through.
From now on, all navigating through the Strait of Hormuz is forbidden.
They were in a much better position. The Iranians were much stronger than the image that had been cultivated about them.
The war rages on for over 3 months. As peace negotiations repeatedly fail, Donald Trump insists a deal is imminent, multiple times.
We've had very big discussions with Iran. They want to make a deal. We thought pretty much getting close to making a deal. They want to make a deal. They want to negotiate.
Tehran and Washington send top representatives to Pakistan to come up with a roadmap for peace. While there are still no Israelis officially present at the talks, one key point for Iran was Israel's complete withdrawal from Lebanon. But once again, on the eve of a deal being signed, in April 2026, Israel attacks Beirut, carrying out 100 strikes in 10 minutes, causing devastating damage. Yet despite these attacks, on the 17th of June 2026, the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding is signed by Iran and the US. For a brief moment, diplomacy appears to prevail, as an uneasy ceasefire is reached. For Israel, the possible implications of this peace are deeply concerning.
Now Israel has to probably contemplate that it has to live in the Middle East, in which Iran will be likely a larger force than it was on February of 2026. It is a failure, and then they have to calibrate how they coexist with it. I don't think they will desist from trying to take Iran down. But the fact of it is that this particular chapter, they have come short.
As the Memorandum of Understanding comes into effect, the Strait of Hormuz, now a focal point of this war, reopens briefly. But it's a brittle peace, collapsing after just 19 days. Ever-escalating disputes over the waterway, along with Israel's continued attacks across the region, throw the two sides further apart. And in July 2026, in response to Iranian attacks on tankers, the US once again bomb Iran. Iran immediately closes the strait again. The Memorandum of Understanding collapses. As the ceasefire shatters, Donald Trump makes his feelings clear.
To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people.
Tehran delivers its own warning. Any attempt to capture Iranian territory will force a change in their strategy.
من اعلام میکنم تمام شد. هم مذاکره هم جنگ تمام شد. در مورد اینکه بخوان نقطه‌ای از سرزمین ما را هم بگیرن، ما ممکنه وارد همون مرحله تهاجمی بشیم. از حالت تدافعی خارج بشیم، از حالت بازدارندگی و مقابله به مثل خارج بشیم.
As violence reignites across the Middle East, all sides launch missiles and drones. Air defense systems fire back as explosions ripple across the region. Meanwhile, Israel's military remains active on three fronts: the occupied West Bank, Gaza, and Lebanon. Confrontations, decades in the making. A country reshaped by a coup that overthrew a leader. A revolution that transformed a region. Now, a cycle of strikes, retaliation, and escalation. And a Middle East, once again, in the grips of conflict and deadly violence.